Long before any European ships reached the shores of the Americas, great societies rose and fell, leaving behind silent cities and mysteries that puzzle us to this day. These were not simple, wandering tribes. They were architects, astronomers, engineers, and artists who built entire communities in places that seem impossible to live in. They mastered the desert, bringing water to thirsty lands and building homes in the faces of sheer cliffs. They created a world of incredible complexity and deep spiritual meaning, tracking the sun and stars from carefully built observatories. But who were these people? How did they manage to build such amazing societies in such a harsh environment? And why did they suddenly abandon the magnificent homes they worked so hard to create? For thousands of years, the earliest people of the Southwest lived a life on the move. They were hunter-gatherers, following the seasons and the herds of animals across a land that was cooler and wetter than it is today. This was the time of giant beasts, and these Paleo-Indians hunted huge mammoths, mastodons, and ancient bison. To take down such massive prey, they developed a special tool, the Clovis point, a beautifully crafted spearhead of stone, sharp enough to pierce thick hides. They also used a powerful spear-throwing device called an atlatl, which allowed them to throw their spears with incredible force and accuracy. They knew the land intimately, every plant, every water source, every hidden cave that could offer shelter. They gathered wild plants, nuts, and seeds, using grinding stones called manos and metates to make nutritious flour. These early people left behind few permanent traces, just the faint echoes of their lives in scattered stone tools and the ash of ancient campfires. They survived and thrived in this changing landscape for generations, but their world was about to change forever. A new idea was traveling up from the south, from the lands we now call Mexico, an idea that would allow them to stop wandering and build something entirely new. That idea was farming. The arrival of corn, or maize, followed by beans and squash, transformed everything. This trio of crops, known as the Three Sisters, was a marvel of agriculture. The corn stalks grew tall, providing a natural pole for the bean vines to climb. The beans, in turn, put vital nitrogen back into the soil, which the corn needed to grow strong, and the broad, leafy squash plants spread out along the ground, creating a living mulch that kept the soil moist and choked out weeds. For the first time, people could reliably grow their own food. They no longer had to constantly wander in search of their next meal. This simple but profound change allowed them to settle down, build permanent homes, and support larger families and communities. And from this one change, three distinct and powerful cultures began to rise in the desert. In the north, on the high plateaus and in the deep canyons of the Four Corners region, lived the ancestral Pueblo. To the south, in the hot, dry river valleys of what is now Arizona, the Hohokam people built their world, and in the rugged mountains between them, the Mogollon culture carved its own unique existence. Each group had its own way of life, its own art, and its own secrets. The ancestral Pueblo people are famous for their amazing homes, and their skill grew over centuries. At first, they live in pit houses, which were dug several feet deep into the ground. The earthy walls kept the homes cool in the blistering summer and warm in the freezing winter. A sturdy roof of wood and mud covered the pit, with an opening in the center for smoke from the central fire pit to escape, and a ladder for people to get in and out. But as their population grew, their building skills grew too. They began to build incredible apartment-like structures above the ground called pueblos, with many rooms stacked on top of each other, all made from carefully shaped stones and thick mud mortar. Some of these villages had hundreds of rooms and were home to thousands of people. In the heart of these villages, they built special round underground rooms called kivas. These were sacred spaces, entered from the roof by a ladder, just like the old pit houses. Inside, a fire pit glowed in the center, and a small hole in the floor, called a sipapu, symbolized the place where their ancestors first emerged into this world. The kiva was the center of their spiritual world, a place for ceremonies, community meetings, and passing down stories. But their building genius didn't stop there. What if they could build a city that was also a fortress, hidden from sight? High in the cliffs of places like Mesa Verde, the ancestral Pueblo people began to construct entire villages tucked into massive natural alcoves. These cliff dwellings were masterpieces of engineering and defensive design. To reach them, people had to climb steep, treacherous paths and use hand and footholds cut directly into the vertical rock face. Living in these cliff palaces protected them from the hot sun, the winter snow, and perhaps from their enemies. Inside, the rooms were small but perfectly built, with fires for cooking and warmth. Life was a constant climb, but it was safe and secure. While they were building their homes in the cliffs, another group of ancestral Pueblo people were building something even bigger and more mysterious in a place called Chaco Canyon. This was the true center of their world. Here, they built enormous structures called great houses, unlike anything seen before. The largest, Pueblo Bonita, was a massive D-shaped building with over 600 rooms, rising 4 stories high. The walls were a marvel of masonry, built with a core of rubble and a veneer of carefully shaped stones, a style that made them strong and beautiful. Strange, perfectly straight roads, some 30 feet wide, stretched out from Chaco for miles in every direction, connecting it to over 150 other great houses across the land. Some buildings were aligned with the movements of the sun and moon, marking solstices and equinoxes. Chaco was a center for trade, drawing in precious turquoise, colorful macaw feathers from Mexico, and shells from the distant ocean. It was a place of immense spiritual and political power. But the people of Chaco were not the only masters of the desert. Far to the south, another culture was making the dry land bloom. The Hohokam people settled in a land where water was life, but it was incredibly scarce, so they became master engineers of water. They designed and dug hundreds of miles of irrigation canals to carry water from the Salt and Gila rivers to their fields. This was an incredible achievement, unparalleled in North America at the time. Some of the main canals were over 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, all dug by hand over generations, with nothing more than stone tools and digging sticks. Thanks to this life-giving water, they could grow abundant crops of corn, beans, squash, and even cotton, which they wove into textiles. Their villages, like the great settlement of Snaketown, became busy communities with hundreds of homes. They also built large, oval-shaped ball courts. These sunken walled arenas, similar to those found in Mexico, were likely used for ritual games that were important to their society. The Hohokam created their own unique style of pottery, a reddish-brown ware decorated with red paint, and were skilled at making intricate jewelry and art from shells they traded for from as far away as the Gulf of California. They had conquered the desert with water, but another group in the mountains was mastering the art of fire and clay. Tucked away in the mountains of modern-day New Mexico and Arizona, the Mogollon people lived a different kind of life. Like the early Pueblo, they lived in pit houses but often built them on high mesas and bluffs, giving them a commanding view of the land around them. They were skilled farmers and hunters, but what really set the Mogollon apart is their pottery. The artists of the Mimbres, a part of the Mogollon culture, created some of the most stunning and imaginative pottery in the ancient world. They painted bowls with intricate black and white designs, showing everything from complex geometric patterns to lively scenes of animals, people, and mythical creatures. These images show us a world of hunters chasing antelope, women giving birth, and fantastic beings dancing. Many of these beautiful bowls have a small hole carefully punched in the bottom. They were placed over the faces of the dead for burial, a ritual act of killing the bowl to release its spirit along with the humans. The images on this pottery give us a rare glimpse into the beliefs, myths, and daily lives of a people who left no written words. For hundreds of years, these three cultures thrived. They built great cities, farmed the land, and created beautiful art. The Southwest was a busy place with trade routes connecting communities and spreading ideas, goods, and traditions. But then, in the late 1200s, something began to go terribly wrong. The people in the great cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde and the massive houses of Chaco Canyon packed up their belongings and left. The vast Hohokam canal systems fell into disuse and were filled with silt. The Mogollon Mountains were abandoned. An entire way of life across a vast region seemed to disappear. For decades, archaeologists called it a collapse, a mystery of a vanished people. But they didn't vanish. They moved. The big question is, why? The clues point to a perfect storm of problems. Scientists studying tree rings have discovered that a massive drought, lasting for more than 23 years, gripped the region in the late 13th century. This was not an ordinary dry spell. It was a crippling generational drought that withered the corn and dried up the rivers. Without rain, the crops failed, and the carefully built societies began to starve. There is also chilling evidence of conflict. At the edges of their world, some abandoned villages show signs of violent attacks and burned homes. As resources became scarce, competition and fear may have torn the communities apart. The old religious and social systems that had worked for centuries may have failed to solve these new problems. When the ceremonies for rain brought no clouds, people may have lost faith in their leaders and their traditions. So the people did what their ancestors had always done when faced with hardship. They moved. They left their great homes and started a long journey to find a new place to live. The ancestral Pueblo didn't disappear. They migrated south and east, towards more reliable sources of water like the Rio Grande River and the Little Colorado River. Over time, they joined with existing communities or created new ones, their culture changing and adapting along the way. Their descendants are the Pueblo people of today, the Hopi, the Zuni, and the Acoma, and the many pueblos of the Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. The oral histories of these modern tribes tell stories of their migrations from the ancient northern homelands, places they still consider sacred. The great cities in the cliffs and canyons were not forgotten. They became powerful ancestral sites, visited for pilgrimage and prayer. The Hohokam and Mogollon people also moved and changed, their legacy blending into the tribes that now live in the southern deserts, such as the O'odham and the Tarahumara. The ancient ones did not vanish. They adapted, survived, and endured. Their journey continues today in the traditions, languages, and beliefs of their descendants who still call the American Southwest their home. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story fascinating, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And let us know in the comments which piece of ancient history you'd like us to explore next. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.